I'm tempted to start with the fact that this could be the last British Marxism ever. maybe in a situation in September the 19th of the British state having broken up, but we'll talk more about that. I want to sort of start with what I think is a very unique and exciting experience that's taking place across every town, city, scheme, every workplace, every college across Scotland. There's quite a fascinating explosion of meetings, debates. One poll suggested that over 70% of all Scots are permanently discussing independence at least once a day. And anybody who's from Scotland will tell you that that is certainly the situation. What's happening is that we're seeing a massive opening up of a debate about what kind of society Scotland could be, what the potential is under an independent Scotland. And I want to give some examples of the scale of it. Tommy Sheridan, who many folk will know here, did a speech in Kirkcaldy a couple of months ago. It's now reached 150,000 hits, 4 times as many hits as the First Minister's white paper when that was launched, which again I find very interesting. He's spoken to audiences over the last 10 weeks of up to 15,000 people. You can go through the list. An Oban population of 5,000, meeting 500, Kirkcaldy 400, Cardonald 500, and so on and so forth. Mass meetings taking place every night. One night last week in the south side of Glasgow, I estimate there was around about 1,000 people in various public meetings debating and discussing independence. You've seen the growth of a whole range of radical sort of left-wing campaigns around independence, ranging from the Radical Independence Campaign, who've organised 2 conferences, each with over 1,000 people at the conferences. An organisation called the National Collective, which is a gathering of artists and various cultural figures. They'll put on somewhere in the region of 200 events over this summer. And then the Govanhill Pool in the south side of Glasgow, a pool that we fought to save. I believe they had a launch meeting of over 600 there on Saturday. An organisation called the Commonweal, made up of various sort of left reformists, left nationalists, trade unionists. They organised an event to debate what a new Scotland could look like. Last Sunday, 700-800 people at the event. And you really have to understand that a movement has emerged across Scotland for independence. And one of the most exciting features, I think, of the campaign so far, the Yes campaign, is that we organise mass canvassings through the Radical Independence Campaign, where 100 to 150 activists go into big working class schemes. We chat the doors and we have discussions about why you should vote yes in the referendum. This is genuinely something that has never happened before around the issue of independence. And what I want to argue is that what characterises this movement for independence is not a narrow nationalism or a hard Scottish nationalism. It's certainly true that in some of the demos you see weird kilts and weird flags and folk dressed up in weird garb and so on, but by and large that is not what characterises it. What characterises it is opposition to austerity, opposition to war, and opposition to racist scapegoating. These are the 3 core elements that are dominant inside of the meetings, the demonstrations, the discussions, the forums, and so on and so forth. And what independence is doing is becoming a vehicle to allow working class people to express their hostility to Tory rule and their opposition to Tory austerity and neoliberalism. If there's any doubt about how much hatred for the Tories runs deep in Scottish society, there was one opinion poll conducted, I think it was 2 weeks ago, where they asked the question, if it looks like a Tory government is going to be elected, if Cameron is going to win the election, support for independence goes from 41% to 54%, a clear majority in favour of independence if that is what turns out to be the situation. And what's happening is that workers' expectations and hopes are rising at the prospect of an alternative to neoliberalism and Tory austerity. I'll put it this way, the prospect of David Cameron being the last Prime Minister of Britain is terrifying the Tories and the ruling class in this country as much as it's exciting the left in Scotland and indeed further afield. And I'm going to quote the Economist. Has anybody seen the Economist this week? Oh, I'll dig it out. I wish I have brought it with me, but anyway, I'll dig it out. I'll show you it later. It's a picture of a Braveheart Wallace Scot looking absolutely crazy with one of these orange red-headed turbans on. But what it says, what The Economist says this week is that even a narrow victory for the status quo would be the biggest blow to the UK since the Irish Free State was born in 1922. To put it mildly, the British ruling class and their allies across the Atlantic are absolutely crapping themselves at the prospect of the British state being dismantled. I'll use Tommy Sheridan's phrase, which I think is a very good phrase. He says, it's squeaky bum time for the British establishment. They're absolutely petrified at the prospect of losing Britain. And the ruling class strategy to save the Union is well known as the Better Together campaign, which is really an unholy alliance. The Tory party, the Labour party and the Liberal Democrats, who have put together a really pro-austerity unholy alliance, which is well known as Project Fear. And for anybody who's been following the campaign in Scotland, it's the most miserable, cynical, depressing, scaremongering campaign you could possibly imagine. And a couple of months ago, it sort of started off quite friendly. You know, it was like first of all we had the intervention from Mars. That's David Bowie. When David Bowie he came and said, "Oh, we can't vote for independence. Think of the cultural music that you'll lose. We'll get the Beatles and we'll get the Rolling Stones." So that was quite nice. You think, "Oh well, okay, it's not getting nasty yet." Then the next we had J.K. Rowling. It's what we've called the Harry Potter versus the Hobbit fight. As Angela McCormick was described, and apparently the guy for the Hobbits became up to his for independence. And of course, as we know, J.K. Rowling, the billionaire author of the Harry Potter series, has just given £1 million to the No campaign. So it's ranged for these cultural figures coming in on either side too. I mean, the best one I heard was, I don't think this is a problem actually, it says that if you have an independent Scotland, you won't be able to watch EastEnders. I mean, tragedy or what? I mean, the one that I do some problem is the threat that we're going to lose Doctor Who, right? I can assure you that Doctor Who will still exist. So you've got this sort of big debate where everything is very polarised, but what's happened recently is that the big guns have came into play now in terms of pushing opposition to independence. You've had Barroso, President of the European Commission, coming out against it, saying there's no way you'll be allowed to join the European Union. You've had Hillary Clinton, who's intervened, arguing that we need to remain a robust United Kingdom. And of course Barack Obama has intervened as well. My favourite one, which is causing real division in Scottish society, is the Pope. The Pope's come out against it. I was talking to somebody who was saying that a Grand Master from an All's Lodge in Ayrshire was saying, I don't know, I think I'm for this independence thing. There's something to be said for the Pope's position here. I think I need to change my position. So you've got this you've got these big guns who are sort of putting the boot into independence. One of the most significant ones is George Robertson, Bomber Robertson, as he's known, the ex-UK former Defence Minister and the NATO Secretary General, where he argues that it will be cataclysmic for the whole world. Scotland votes for independence. The forces of evil and darkness will benefit. Terrorism will grow. So you've got this huge effort being made by the ruling classes across Europe, Britain and America, who are starting to get very nasty now, because what they're beginning to think is that the unthinkable is now thinkable. The impossible is now possible. They genuinely fear the loss of the British state. And if you look at the opinion polls, recently they're starting to get closer. There's no doubt that yes, the Yes campaign is still behind, but the polls continue to narrow. And I think the momentum, unquestionably, is with the Yes side. I mean, anybody who tells you in Scotland, it's virtually impossible to find a no meeting. They don't turn up at any of the meetings, don't turn up and take part in any of the debates. They're really in a state of panic and crisis. But nevertheless, the opinion polls, YouGov has Yes on 41% as of last week. Panel Base has Yes on 46%. On an average of 70 polls, the last 70 polls, it's sitting at Yes is on 41% and No is sitting on 59%. But as The Economist said yesterday, what's terrifying them is that there's 15 to 20% of the population who are undecided. And the bulk of the people who are undecided are working class voters living and working in big housing estates across the length and breadth of Scotland. And what's actually terrifying them is a massive turnout. I mean, I'll give you an example of how big the turnout's going to be in Scotland. There's something like 120,000 16 to 18-year-olds are entitled to register to vote. I checked the figures before I came here. 105,000 of the 16 to 18-year-olds are registered to vote. And again, that's terrifying them, because they're big making sure that young people are geared up for a yes vote. And they're also terrified of working class people breaking from their disenfranchisement and voting. I'm going to quote The Economist again. I love this quote for The Economist this week. People from hard-scrabble places like Shettleston are most likely to vote yes. What are we going to do? And indeed they are. Indeed they are across working class housing estates. We're gearing up to register people to vote. We're in there registering people. We're campaigning regularly and consistently. But I want to go back to sort of Project Fear's main arguments. I don't want to spend too much time on it, but it's wall-to-wall carpet bombing every day for Project Fear. And essentially the arguments go around, if you vote for independence, you'll lose your pensions. I mean, I spoke to a train driver guy that I know. He said he'd received a letter from ScotRail saying that if you vote yes, you will lose your pension. I mean, this is the tactics that they're going to. Shipyard jobs. Blackmail over the shipyard jobs. Ian Davidson, the Scottish Labour MP for the south side of Glasgow, 6 months ago says to the shipyard workers, if you don't vote for independence, we'll make sure you don't get the contracts for the shipyards. They're basically blackmailing workers who vote against independence. We've had Standard Life, a whole range of insurance companies, banks, organisations for the finance sector saying that they'll move to London. I think some of them should actually leave Scotland, to be honest with you, on the basis of how they operate. Also, there's theories about Scotland being subsidy junkies. I mean, the figure that the ruling class are throwing around is that we receive £1,400 per head extra from the British taxpayer, and that we'll lose that unless we vote to stay. So there's a whole sort of plethora of these things taking place. The best one I like though is Darling's what we call the sermon on the pound. Where Darling has essentially threatened that we won't be able to share the currency, the economy will be bankrupted, hundreds of thousands of jobs will leave the country, and you're going to run out of oil. That's the other big one that they're throwing at us. So they're really throwing everything at the book. And they're also using arguments around things like terrorism. If you vote for independence, it'll be a gift to terrorist attacks in Glasgow. We should point out there was a terrorist attack in Glasgow a couple of years ago, because of British foreign policy across the world. It already had actually taken place. But to refute those arguments, I don't often use the Financial Times to refute these arguments, but the Financial Times in a series a couple of months ago called Should Scotland Go? Basically make it very clear. They don't think Scotland should go, but they argue very clearly that Scotland would be an absolutely viable, independent, capitalist state with high public finances, a per capita income per Scots per head £1,000 higher than the rest of the UK. They say it would be the 14th richest country in the world, and then they sort of start orgasming about the possibilities around what they call its hydrocarbon bounty, and that there's big opportunities for business inside of an independent Scotland. So for us as socialists, the debate is not about the viability of Scotland as a capitalist state. That's not in question. That's not the debate that we want to engage in. We want to have a debate about how do we redistribute wealth and power across the whole of society. How do we distribute from the top of society to the bottom of society? And one of the poorest countries in terms of poverty, health inequality, life expectancy, and so on. That's the fundamental debate that we want to take place. And then we have to say a couple of things about the big debates around the economy. I think the first thing is we should say is that we're not in favour of keeping the pound. We're for a separate currency. We disagree with Alex Salmond's position that we should join the Bank of England and that we should keep the pound and we should allow the British economy and the Bank of England to control interest rates and essentially the key levers of the economy. So we're for a separate currency, and we're also opposed to the European Union for obvious reasons. It's a boss's club, it's a thief's kitchen, it's the basis for mass austerity that's hardwired into the whole edifice of the European structure of capitalism. So we're opposed to that. I want to look sort of briefly ideologically about what's taking place around the referendum, because I don't think there's any doubt about it that one of the reasons why UKIP got their first seat in Scotland, right, they got 10%, they got their first seat, is because of the whipping up of racism, xenophobia and anti-immigrant hysteria that is very much the fabric of politics in Scotland as it is anywhere else. And I think that's laid the basis partly for UKIP to grab their first seat in Scotland. Again, the newspapers regularly have attacks on the welfare state, the big state, the strivers and skivers. This is the bread and butter of the Daily Mail and all the Tory rags across Scotland. There's a major onslaught against the welfare state. Probably best summed up most disgustingly by Joanne Lamont, the leader of the Labour Party, or as we call her, Joanne Lament, whose position is that we can't live in a something-for-nothing culture. In other words, we need to attack welfare benefits, we need to attack the poor. Nothing about opposition to food banks in Scotland. I mean, the figures for food banks are horrendous. Last year there was 4,000 people using food banks in Scotland. This year it's nearly 50,000. And that's a massive increase in extreme poverty. So there's a massive ideological attack. And in terms of the legacy of British imperialism, we're just about to witness a new offensive in Scotland by David Cameron over the First World War celebrations. David Cameron, this is the internal debate. We'll get the Commonwealth Games, so Salmond's using the Commonwealth Games to boost up the yes side, not to be outdone by David Cameron, who's coming to Glasgow to tell us the wonders of the First World War, why we should celebrate Ypres, Flanders and Passchendaele. I mean, it's absolutely nauseating, but it's nevertheless, it's a major feature of the jingoistic strategy of the ruling class to convince people to stay part of Britain, and we'll certainly be opposing that on August the 4th when David Cameron comes here. What's our response to this? What do we say to the jingoism and the rest of it? I want to start with John Maclean. With John Maclean, the Red Clydesider, when he describes the Union Jack as a butcher's apron, dripping in blood from head to toe. From Cork to Calcutta, it's a history of famine, war, persecution, devastation and destruction. What Mike Davis in his book, Late Victorian Holocaust, charts an absolute catalogue of horror of the British Empire across Africa, Asia, India, Ireland and so on and so forth. And we are for the breakup of that state. We're for the breakup of it, what it represents historically, and we're for the breakup of it concretely just now on a number of key anti-imperialist grounds. I think the first thing to say is that the main enemy for us in Scotland, although we have to challenge Scottish nationalism, and we do, the main enemy for us is British nationalism, what British nationalism represents. For anybody with any doubt about that, I don't know if folk were there last Saturday, you'd have seen 5,000 Orangemen sort of marching through the streets of Glasgow. They're planning to have a huge demonstration 5 days before it, and we will witness the most ugly side of racism and nationalism taking place there. So we have to oppose that. A couple of other major reasons why we have to oppose it. Obvious ones. Trident, £100 billion for the upgrade. Scotland pays up to £5 billion a year to fund it. We want to scrap Trident. I don't know if folks seen this in the papers yesterday, but there was 4 CND activists in Glasgow managed to stop a convoy with 6 nuclear warheads on it going across the M8. Our commitment is in an independent Scotland. You won't be any more convoys coming through Glasgow with nuclear weapons on it heading up to Faslane, because we want to scrap Trident, and not just for the benefit of Scottish people, we want to scrap it across the globe. And one of the reasons why the British ruling class and the Americans are terrified is because they've nowhere to relocate it. I mean, there's some estimates that it'll cost between 20 and 30 billion pounds just to relocate it. So for Scotland to vote for independence and to scrap Trident would be a huge boost for peace across the world, and it would be a huge defeat for the American ruling class using Scotland as a base for its weapons across to attack Europe. And we're also, some people in Scotland say, well, what about the jobs? What about the thousands of jobs? What we say is that we can retrain the talent, and we can redeploy the talent into fighting climate change, creating green jobs, creating jobs of value. I mean, I like one of the things that Jim Sellers has been going around the circuit saying is, what we do with Trident, what we'll do is we'll invest in aid ships. And we'll go and feed the hungry across the world. That's something an independent Scotland could do. You know, we could do millions of things other than build weapons of mass destruction. So scrapping Trident is a major issue for us. Secondly, the issue of trying to sever the link between British and American imperialism, what they call the special relationship. If Scotland was to vacate the Union, that would create a major problem for the American and the rest of the British ruling class to engage in future wars, like the wars in Afghanistan, the wars in Iraq. Very important issue for us, particularly in Scotland. A poignant thing is, you know, the 10th anniversary of young Gordon Gentle's death, a Scottish soldier who basically died for a lie. His mother, Rose Gentle, I was speaking to the other day, and she says, no more wars for lies. And that's a very important element of our argument. It's an anti-imperialist position that if we break up the British state, we won't have to get involved in more illegal and immoral foreign wars. And that's tied up with the whole question of NATO, the North Atlantic Treaty Organisation, or as Angela calls it, the North Atlantic Terrorist Organisation. The issue of making it more difficult for NATO to engage in projects like the bombing of Libya, Syria. We know they've got their eyes on Ukraine. That would weaken their ability to engage in such military adventures. And I'm in favour of having a different foreign policy in Scotland. I was saying this to folk the other day. The first thing that we should argue for is that we should have a Palestinian embassy in Scotland. That's what we need in Scotland. And that'll let people know that we mean business when we talk about breaking up the British state. What I want to do for a few minutes now is look at, because that may seem pretty forward, those arguments in an audience like this, but there are some people on the left, some good trade unionists, some good people in the Labour Party who have fallen for the argument that you should vote no in the referendum. Best sort of summed up by an organisation called the Red Paper Collective, which is named after Gordon Brown's paper, the Red Paper that he wrote in the late 70s when he was a student at Edinburgh University. And what they argue is that voting yes will break the unity of the working class, and that by voting no, we're preserving the unity of British workers, Scottish, English and Welsh workers, that has been built up over a 150-year period of struggle for the Chartists, through to the suffragettes, the general strike, the UCS working, the Great Miners' Strike, 84, 85, and up to the poll tax. And they argue that, you know, to defend the Union is to defend that tradition. It's even seen Gordon Brown, I mean, incredibly in the Daily Record, quoting John McLean and trying to invoke the spirit of the Red Rising. It's completely and utterly outrageous, but nevertheless is a serious effort to confuse, disorientate and convince trade unionists to vote no. And our position on this is this is wrong. This is giving the British state left cover for the defence of the Union. And our position is that the unity of the working class is not the same as the unity of the British state. The unity of English, Welsh and Scots isn't contingent on the maintenance of that British state or the capitalist interests that it serves and represents. So we oppose that position that exists among sections of the left. And our argument is simple. Voting no is signing up to another 5 years of Tory austerity. Voting no is signing up to the privatisation of the National Health Service. I can't remember the woman's name, but last week the top sort of breast surgeon in Scotland, who works in Glasgow, basically came out and says, if we vote against this, the NHS won't exist in Scotland in 10 years' time. And there's a very powerful argument, you know, against staying in the Union to defend the NHS. A vote for independence is a vote against zero-hours contracts. People should also remember that David Cameron, they're very clear about it, they've only implemented 40% of the cuts. We've still got 60% of the cuts to be implemented. Therefore, staying in the Union, far from preserving workers' unity, it preserves the unity of the bossy state, and it makes it easier for them to attack and divide and exploit workers. And the other thing that has to be sort of raised around the left arguments is what is the Labour Party committed to? Miliband is committed to the welfare benefit cap, and he's committed to Tory spending limits. So the other argument that is used, and I think it's a bogus argument, is that we have to remain part of the British state because Westminster is the only institution, the British Parliament is the only institution that's capable of confronting the power of the global multinationals and of global capitalism. I mean, very quickly, I mean, where's the evidence for that? Look at, well, there's no evidence of Labour governments doing anything to achieve that. If you look at companies like Vodafone, Starbucks, Amazon, they're all dodging taxes. They're not paying any taxes. And if you look at issues like privatisation, low corporation taxes, tax evasion, all of that is currently on show, and there's no promise to change it. There's absolutely no promise to reverse this process taking place whatsoever. So we don't agree with the left arguments around that. For us, breaking the union will give confidence to English and Welsh workers. We believe that there is an alternative to Tory austerity. And of course, in an independent Scotland, we'll still need workers' unity. I mean, this idea that the need for unity will evaporate if Scotland votes for independence, I think it's absolute nonsense. There'll still be the need for unity to fight multinational corporations north and south of the border. But more importantly, Scottish and English and Welsh workers can continue to share the lessons from their experiences of struggle, continue to build solidarity and show solidarity in our fights against austerity and against the Tories. I want to deal quickly with a popular myth, because this is quite a dominant one. I'm sure you hear it in England as well. If you vote for independence, we're leaving the English and the Welsh to permanent Tory rule. I mean, that's quite a scary prospect, actually. But it's not true. It's not true. I think that's an insult to English and Welsh workers, that they can't actually fight and confront the Tories. But secondly, factually it's not true. There's actually only two occasions, 1964 and 1974, where the Labour government in the UK needed the Scottish MPs to achieve it. All the other occasions, that's never been the case. And also, if you look at the 40 odd Labour MPs that go to Westminster, look what they vote for. They're voting for welfare cuts. They're voting for austerity. They're voting for Tory spending limits. So again, that is a bogus argument. And I'll tell you what's happening around these arguments. See, the arguments that the Left No campaign are putting, they're beginning to fracture. There's a whole number of examples that show that defending the indefensible is becoming more difficult. And I want to give a few examples of it. Pat Rafferty, a guy called Pat Rafferty, former president of the STUC. I think he used to be in the PCS maybe, or was it Unite?
No, he's Scottish Secretary Unite.
Scottish Secretary Unite, yeah. He used to be former president of the STUC as well. He's come out against it. He's come out and changed his position. He's now for a yes vote. There's been an organisation called Labour for Independence set up there, and they launched a meeting with 400 or 500 people at the STUC. A guy called Bob Thompson is the former treasurer of the Scottish Labour Party. He's come out very clearly and put the case for why we need to break up the British state. Their argument is that if you want to reclaim the Labour Party back to the old Labour Party, the welfare state Labour Party, to the traditions of Keir Hardie, then we have to reclaim the Labour Party back in Scotland by breaking from Westminster control. A guy called Stephen Smellie, people know for Glasgow, very well known Unison activist, was important in the No campaign. Again, he shifted sides. Even yesterday, the latest one's a guy called Des Lockney. Des Lockney, who's been the Trades Council Secretary for about 1,000 years. No, that's about at least 35 years. Good guy, Des Lockney, you know, a real sort of stalwart of the Labour Party and the Labour movement. He's come out yesterday and he's jumped ship as well. And this is going to continue to happen. And why is this discussion important? What does Professor John Curtis say about what's going to decide this? What he says is that 800,000 Labour voters who voted in the last election who voted, he says 400,000 of them, 25% of them are for yes, 25% are for no, 50% in the middle. 400,000 working class people bang in the middle who haven't actually decided what they're doing. And for us, that's the crucial question. How do we get to the working class? For us, the issue of the working class is absolutely fundamental to winning a key victory. And that's why we are not just simply cheerleaders for Alex Salmond, the SNP. We're opposed to some of the uncritical approaches towards Salmond. And one of the reasons why, I mean, everybody knows Salmond's a smart operator, a very astute politician, but part of the reason why he is because the opposition's, I mean, it gives mediocrity a bad name, as somebody once famously said. He said a few things playing in his favour. But the most important thing for us is that the vision that Salmond puts forward is not a radical vision. Salmond wants to keep the pound, keep the monarchy, stay in NATO, push for low corporation taxes, and so on and so forth. He's trying to dampen and lower workers' expectations that nothing will fundamentally change. And if you look at Salmond's role over Grangemouth, disgraceful over Grangemouth, because he was quite happy to watch the shop stewards get sacked up there, lose their pensions, and for the bosses to try and break the union. That's a warning to us that we need to keep our guard up against Salmond. Our role in this campaign is to raise the banner, is to raise the sights of what's possible in an independent Scotland. For us, that means renationalising all the public services that have been privatised, taking water back, taking gas back, renationalising the vital industries like the oil industry and the banks. It means abolishing the monarchy. It means scrapping the anti-union laws. And one thing that's close to my heart is the question of immigration controls. One of the first things that we should do in an independent Scotland is shut down the equivalent of Yarlswood up there, which is Dungavel Detention Centre. We hold them to that. The other thing that we want to do is we want to drive out Atos, G4S, Serco. This is what we're doing. We're confronting big business and trying to link the independence fight with a fight against capitalism and a fight against austerity. We have a huge opportunity in Scotland to break the British state. My plea to you as English and Welsh socialists is to come to Scotland and help us do it. Help us bury the coffin of the British state on the 18th. That will help workers in Scotland, across Britain, Wales and indeed the whole world. So come to Glasgow, Edinburgh, the rest of it, and we'll beat them.
Comrades, I've lived in England for the last 30 years, so I'd like to give you a bit of an outsider's view of the Scottish independence debate. You see, I don't really think it's resonated with comrades down where I am on the south coast. Really what an epochal victory the nationalist victory at the last general election was. You know, we get places like, you know, inner city areas of Glasgow, Edinburgh, Dundee that went to the nationalists. I mean, this was truly groundbreaking stuff, and I really don't think that has resonated with comrades in England quite as strongly as it should have done. And also what hasn't resonated is this image that Salmond projects. I mean, Keir talks about it, this exceptionally canny operator, you know, and a very astute politician and all the rest of it. Well, you see, when you look at what Salmond did a year or so ago, when he jumped into bed with Rupert Murdoch. Right. Now, this wasn't even post-Leveson. This was while the Leveson inquiry was going on, and then it emerged that Salmond was having secret talks with Murdoch, etc., to get the Sun on the side of the SNP. So this gives us an indication of where his allegiances really lie. And also, let's not forget the offensive behaviour in football matches, which seems to disproportionately discriminate against a particular set of fans. This was something else that Salmond railroaded through. So these are all sort of warning signs for socialists. And there hasn't really been a huge amount of debate on the left in England around the question of Scottish independence, and I think that's a missed opportunity, because when Keir said that we should go up to Scotland and help with the debate, then yeah, maybe we should, but also we should be having the debate done in England, because there's thousands of Scottish people that live in England. In my workplace alone, out of about 10 people, there's 3 expatriate Scots, and we're having these debates all the time, and people are on the phone to their friends, their family, are going up to Glasgow, going up to Edinburgh for the weekend and having these debates as well. And it's especially important for people living in England that they're able to counter these arguments. Like I was talking to a colleague of mine the other day, and she said, well, yeah, I'm for Scottish independence, but I'm a wee bit worried because that'll condemn us to endless Tory governments, etc. So it is really important for comrades in England to be having this debate as well. And I think really the SWP needs to take the bull by the horns and start organising a lot of public rallies and a lot of public meetings around in England to debate these issues. So anyway, as I say, I've lived in England for 26 years. I don't get a vote, but I've booked my ticket. I'm going to be in Glasgow on the 18th. So the next time I see you all, I want it to be in George Square, celebrating a newly independent Scotland. Thanks.
Okay, I'll try and be very quick. I don't really have a lot to say. I'm out in the street in Glasgow, in around Glasgow, and around about North Lanarkshire every week, and we're getting people coming up, and so a lot of them are very angry about independence, not knowing how to vote. We vote no, but they're angry, and you're saying, why are you voting no? Because we should have done it 30 or 40 fucking years ago. That's their argument. And another argument is one shouting, keep the jack, keep the jack. Now we know they're the kind of people we're not going to convince to vote yes. You know, but my favourite one is the wee woman who came down to me one day and she turned around and says to me, she was voting no, and I'm like, why are you voting no? Because Councillor Nolan told me to do so. You know, and I'm like, why are you listening to these people? If you've been to any meetings, if you've heard any of the arguments, no. I say, so you're just going to do what he tells you to do. So the thing is, we really need to get out and get in among people, speak to people, not just in the street, go to their doors, talk on their doors and speak to them at their doors. And now I'm running out of words. I'll pass on to the next person.
Thank you very much.
I just really wanted to raise this from the perspective, believe it or not, of somebody living in London. From my accent you might get confused about it, but I think that the point I want to make about it is that whenever I mean, first of all, just the very fact I've got this accent means that people will come to me and ask me what's happening and what do you think about the issue and so on. And my family has split right down the middle over the question. We've got quite a big family, so I can tell you that basically the division is very, very much a left-right division. You know, and I think that this is something that's very characteristic, not just in Scotland, but also in the debate outside of Scotland. And really the thing about it is that I think that the argument you tend to get from people who are opposed to independence is to say, I'm opposed to nationalism. Now, that really is a bizarre argument when you think about it, because what it essentially means is defending 400 years of British imperialism, 400 years of raping and pillaging the world's resources. And I think that the argument, to me, as a socialist, the argument that we have to oppose the British state and that we're in favour of the destruction of the British state, to me is an argument you cannot oppose, because I would obviously love it to happen through revolution, but that's not the situation that we're currently faced with. So therefore, the idea of being able to vote for it is immensely important. Now, the thing that I think that we have to emphasise about this is two sides, because I think that inside Scotland there is very clearly a common sense argument that says that English workers are generally more right-wing than Scottish workers, and inside England I've certainly come across an argument very often, and I've done a couple of branch meetings on the issue of independence, where people would say that basically Scottish workers are more left-wing. Now, this is actually quite an insidious and dangerous argument when you think about it, and that's part of the reason why I think it's extremely important that we do have these debates in every branch, in every district of the country. And the last thing I want to say is that I think that it would be immensely important for us as socialists who live outside Scotland to take ownership of this debate, to be able to get to Glasgow or Edinburgh or anywhere else in Scotland, and to be able to go and convince people why, as English socialists, we are in favour of the breakup of the British state, and a vote for Scottish independence to me is an immensely powerful and direct way of undermining that stereotype and that potential division between workers. Because, you know, the argument that goes right back in the socialist tradition is that, you know, on the question of nationalism, we're in favour of the right to divorce, right? And that's not something that has to be imposed from above, it's something that's about voluntary. Unity between workers is a voluntary issue that has to be fought for from below. And whether that's going to be about a vote for independence or a vote against independence, the answer has to come from ordinary folk at the bottom of it. So we have a possibility to shape the debate around independence, which is a brilliant job that the Comrades of Scotland have done so far. All the literature and so far they've produced so far. We've got an opportunity, I think, in England and Wales to be able to influence that. And I would say that either Saturday the 16th of August or Saturday the 23rd of August would be ideal dates for us to get a few coaches from up and down the country to organise a big canvassing campaign where we can go and actually have a go at the argument ourselves.
Hello, I know I miss lots, but when I see it on the meeting, I was really happy about it. Like they said, the asylum seekers cannot vote yes for Scotland, but I know that the refugees, we are going to vote for Scotland, because we have been doing this campaign to vote for Scotland so that the Scottish government can have say into the asylum seekers and the refugees in Scotland. So I know it's going to be difficult. I wish the Scottish people allow the asylums to vote for them. I know they're going to have a lot of vote because there are a lot of asylum in Glasgow, and they are all behind Scottish refugee government, because they are really like behind the refugees and asylum seekers in Glasgow, and I'm really proud of that. So if I go back to my groups and my people in Glasgow, I'm going to tell them we have to vote yes for Scotland. Yes for Scotland!
I think I'm just going to sit down. What can I say? Okay. There's a meeting on later today called Has Neoliberalism Changed the Working Class? And there's a book came out a few years ago called Capitalist Realism, and the idea is that workers are now so completely imbued with neoliberal ideas that they can't envisage any other possibility. And part of what is exciting just now, and it's genuinely exciting about what is going on in Scotland, as Keir has outlined, is that for the first time in quite a long time, people have the notion that it doesn't have to be like this. Another Scotland, another world is possible. And without exaggerating, it's not quite the scene in Land and Freedom where people are sitting debating how we take power. But I think there's a very, very exciting process going on where politics, small p, is actually becoming very, very important to people in thousands of working class communities. So I think that's enormously important. And I'm proud to say that we have played a role in that. Keir's excellent pamphlet has sold extremely well, and I think we've been very, very involved in shaping that debate. So I think that's fabulous, and I think essentially what people have said about what we need to do between now and September and building for that is really important. I just want to enter a couple of caveats, okay? And it's probably quite important to say this. There is no guarantee that there will be a yes vote on September 18th. I'm sorry, but that's the case. In fact, the polls still show that a majority are in favour of a no vote. Now, I want to say a thing about that, because for us that would be a setback, and we are arguing very, very hard for a yes vote. However, in contrast to other sections of the left that have thrown themselves uncritically into the yes campaign, I think we would have to say it would be a setback, but actually the struggle goes on. Right? And I'm proud to say that the SWP, again in contrast to some sections of the left, we have been central not just to the independence debate, but also to the anti-fascist debate. We've organised an excellent stand-up to UKIP meeting with a fantastic demonstration against Britain first last week. We've been involved in United Resistance, so we've actually continued to build all these things. So the struggle goes on. The second thing to say is I think Keir has outlined a vision of what is possible, but I think it is important to say it is very different from the vision that is put forward by Alex Salmond and what they intend to implement. So if we are to sustain these hopes and build these hopes, then actually I think building a much, much stronger left in Scotland as part of this process is absolutely, absolutely crucial. And I think that's what we've been attempting to do. And I think the possibilities is, perhaps an even greater extent in the south of the border. The splits in the Scottish left have been very, very bitter over the past few years, but part of this process also does give us the opportunity. Once again, there are whole new layers of activists, there are tens of thousands of people becoming involved who frankly have no interest in what happened in the SSP 10 years ago, who actually want to be part of it. So it also provides us with the best opportunity we've had for a long time to build a renewed and reinvigorated left.
Thank you. Just want to add a couple of points. First thing I want to repeat is Sheila, if anybody was at Dave Sherry's meeting on the First World War, the joke that we learned there from John McLean's Marxist classes, and the question is, why does the sun never set on the British Empire? Because God wouldn't trust imperialist bastards in the dark. Okay. Now, I think we really need to put that potential of what's coming up on September 18th in that context. I want to make a couple of points. So it's in the context of potential to shake up the British state, and I don't need to go over the record of that, but that really is quite inspiring. Second point, I want to reassure and just reiterate what comrades have said about the context of this debate being utterly anti-Tory, anti-austerity, progressive, looking for positives. And let me tell you that a year or two ago, we didn't know what shape the debate would take. We didn't know if it would be featured or focused or by a narrow nationalism. Again, I repeat, it is not that. It is absolutely not that. So if anybody's thinking of coming to Scotland, that's what you're going to get. You're going to get a world of possibilities of working class people discussing how things can be better. So come up, you'll enjoy yourself. The other thing is, crucially, this has shown that there is an alternative. Now, for my political life, the argument has been for governments, for Labour politicians, for trade union leaders, for people who want to see change, saying there can be no change, there is no other way of doing it. And we in Scotland has shown categorically that there is another way. And we're not standing here when we're on the doorsteps. I do not say to people, vote yes and everything will be nirvana and indeed, but what I do say is 100% vote yes, and we have got a chance of defending the NHS, a chance of getting rid of Trident, a chance of scrapping Dungable, a chance of making David Cameron the last Prime Minister creep in. Do I need to go on? There is an alternative. When a government minister stands in a meeting and says he's standing with refugees, he's standing with migrants, a government minister, standing with migrant workers, standing against the fascists, and he will shut down Dungable. That is an alternative, comrades, that needs to be taken right across this country. What other points I want to add is that we are fighting the fight about the working class movement. I want to mention the bedroom tax campaign, because again it's where our politics really can intervene in this whole question of the debate. When they tried to implement the bedroom tax, we in Scotland did not accept what the SNP, good-minded people from every level, councillor to MSP to activist, said to us. Look, don't worry, we'll get independence, we're going to scrap it. We said to them that doesn't help people in the here and now. When we pressurised Labour politicians and Labour activists and they said, wait for the Labour government, we'll scrap it, we said that doesn't help activists in the here and now. It was through the mass movement of ordinary people, let's not forget the people that the Tories put down as the easy mark, the most vulnerable, that have organised and actually pushed through a real gain that has resulted in the only commitment from Miliband, to, as far as I know, to reverse any of the Tory policies, scrap the bedroom tax, and full mitigation by the Scottish Government in Scotland. So today we can say that people in Scotland affected by the bedroom tax will not be paying it. So what does that say? It means that we need to fight within our movement for independent working class action and go full square into the campaign to show the possibility of a better world. But as socialists we need to say, how can we achieve that better world, which is why we have got yes to independence, fight for socialism. And I can't wait to the day where the Scottish Government, the SNP and the politicians' power can turn around to me as a college lecturer facing cuts and redundancies, a big boy in Westminster done it and ran away. Let's take that excuse away from them. You're all welcome to come up. Because I tell you, crucially, in terms of the arguments about left, about Scottish workers and English workers being different, and about the English people, come up and show that we are united for smashing the British state.
Good morning everyone. This is obviously a very one-sided debate, so I'd like to remind you that Scotland, like England, has abolished the death penalty and lynching is illegal. I think Scotland, like England, after independence, I think you're probably going to go actually, it's going to have its bourgeoisie, it's going to have its proletariat, which is what Marx was talking about. Salmond is the bourgeoisie. And if you go independent, he's still going to be the bourgeoisie. And I think if you think Salmond is going to be overthrown, you are quite possibly living in dreamland. The Scottish bourgeoisie is always going to look after itself. And the Scottish proletariat, and if Scotland fails for whatever reason, it is the Scottish proletariat, just like the English proletariat, that is going to take the brunt of it all. What I'd like to know is, can Scotland, a very simple point, can Scotland actually... Oh. Have I turned it on? Oh, right, okay. Can Scotland afford to go independent? Because if it can't, okay, it is the proletariat, probably a lot of you people, who are going to suffer. People of my generation, remember the Bob Dylan song? How many times must a person look up before they can see the sky? How many times are people in Scotland, people in England, who realise that the politicians treat us with absolute contempt and they will shaft us at every given opportunity? The yes camp is lying, the no camp is lying, and you can't believe anything you're told by any of them. Scotland break up the British state, you're living in dreamland. There's 5 million people in Scotland. If you go independent, the British government will just say, all right, go independent. You can't do anything. You cannot break up the British state. You can forget it. Okay, can Scotland afford to go independent? I don't think it can. I don't think it can. I wish you...
I think we need to let the speaker finish.
So, if it can afford to go independent, I say good luck to all of you. But I don't think it can afford to go. And I think the Scottish proletariat will be sent straight down the tubes. Good luck to you all. Good luck to you all.
I think we have to
The last speaker asked the wrong question. Can Scotland afford independence? Well, on one level it can, but on another level it can't. Socialism is actually impossible on the level of a country as large as Russia, let alone on the basis of a country as small as Scotland. The question is whether the transmission towards independence creates conditions in which it's easier to fight for the sort of socialist change that we want. This is the crucial question. And whether it helps undermine imperialism and to break up the British state. You see, if you were around in 1918, presumably you'd have argued against Irish independence on the grounds that Ireland was incapable of having a proper bourgeois state. The question is not really the question of how strong a bourgeois state it will be, it's whether it enables our class to be more confident, to be more combative, more able to fight back against the bourgeoisie. And I have no doubt that a yes for independence would create such conditions. I'm excited by 2 things. One is the scale of the movement, which is a left movement. It's a movement which is not dominated by right-wing nationalist ideas. It's dominated by anti-austerity, anti-imperialist, anti-racist sentiments. That's incredibly important. The second thing is what would happen if there were to be a yes vote. Because it's not true that Scotland would be independent the next day. There would be an 18-month process of discussion and argument about what sort of Scotland we wanted, followed by a parliamentary election for the new Scottish Parliament. That would be a ferment of discussion in which the SNP would be put on the spot. So we've got this new Scotland. What do you want, Alex Salmond? Lower corporation tax to help the bosses. What I want to have is fewer rights for people at work so that we can attract greater investment. I want to stay in NATO. I want to keep the pound so that our economy is dominated by the Bank of England. I want to have the Queen. And against that, we would be able to say we want a Scotland without anti-union laws, with the renationalisation of vital assets, with the rights of migrants and asylum seekers guaranteed, a Scotland where people came before profit. There would be 18 months of discussion around that, followed by an election in which we could put forward our policies around it. 2 things about that. One, that's a fantastic opportunity for the left and for socialists. Secondly, the left in Scotland must not miss this opportunity. If there is independence, and even if there isn't independence, there has to be a single, united left voice in Scotland which is not defined by arguments in the SSP a decade ago. There has to be a united left alternative to Labour, to the Tories, to the Lib Dems and to the Scottish National Party that puts forward the best vision of what the independence campaign has been about. Finally, on the question of the International Brigade, if I may put it like the English and Welsh. I should say, by the way, the SWP has had 48 meetings in England and Wales around the question of independence. We'll be having public meetings at the start of September around it. But we've produced this statement, which I want you to take away from here. Not just the Scots have to do it, the English have to do it as well, and people from more interesting countries as well. My grandmother was French, so that's I just need to read the statement. We are trade unionists living in England and Wales who want to show our solidarity with those campaigning for a yes vote in the Scottish independence referendum. We believe a yes vote would send a powerful message against austerity, militarism and the British state, will weaken the Tories and set for a deep discussion about the sort of Scotland the majority of people want to live in. We look forward to the removal of Trident from Scotland and will fight to stop it being redeployed anywhere else. We want to campaign alongside the socialist and radical yes voices calling for change that weakens imperialism and rule by the rich. We believe in the strongest possible links between workers in England, Wales and Scotland to learn from one another's struggles and to fight together for a future where people come before profit. This is something we want. Getting people to sign up, and there's a column at the end that says you want to get involved in the campaign in Scotland. Get the signed up, we want to take them away, and then we can have large numbers of people going up to Scotland at the end of August to fight for independence.
Regardless of what the outcome of the referendum is, this has shaken up politics in Scotland and possibly in England and Wales, almost more than anything else. And the ruling class has suddenly come to this realisation that they're going to lose the ability to plant the Union Jack anywhere in the world and say, we are top dog, we are top dollar. They're terrified. But another effect it's had is on the Labour Party. It's difficult to explain to people how monolithic the Labour Party has been in the past 40, 50 years. Some people here might remember a time when it wasn't in Scotland. I don't. You weighed the votes, you didn't count them. This has utterly changed. It's actually been a process that's gone through, which has led to the rise of the SNP and the SNP government. Now, as Keir alluded to, there is civil war in the Scottish Labour Party. People are breaking. It's remarkable how strong the loyalty is to Labour, that it still clings on. When they're in alliance with the Tories and the Lib Dems and all the other, you know, Obama and the Pope and the head of NATO, trying to keep this state together. It's remarkable how, you know, consistent that argument to stay in Labour and vote for Labour is. But it's breaking. That's a historic change. And I think whatever the vote is on the 18th, and I hope we'll all be recovering from hangovers on the 19th, that very day or the day after, we should have a demonstration at Faslane. We should have a demonstration at Dungavel. We should be outside the Scottish Parliament. Wherever in Scotland people have organised on this debate, whatever the outcome, the day after, the fight still goes on. And that would be a fantastic, because David Heyman, who's an actor in the Yes campaign, has been going around Scotland to make a programme. He's going to these out-of-the-way places, the islands, the rural communities, etc. And they have changed. He describes how they have changed their attitude to it. They weren't sure at first. It was a very media-driven argument. Now, in the last few months, it's been invigorated. People have been coming up to the meetings, and the mood has changed from no to yes in these communities as well. So I think to shape what happens post-referendum is extremely important for how we shape the Scotland that we can build, but also have an effect on the rest of the world. The progress that we've made in the asylum seekers, welcoming refugees, etc., the campaign that's been built up, the contacts we've had on that, does not stop with a yes vote. So, can I propose that we organise demonstrations for the day after the vote, that they will take place, whatever the vote is, because we are going to be the people who shape the new Scotland after that event.
Yes. Okay, I'll come back on a couple of the points that we made. I mean, I think it might have been Ian that said that there's absolutely no guarantees that this is going to be successful.
Right.
And I think that's true, but there's no guarantees that it's going to be successful. But I do think we should stress the point that it's in the balance. It's absolutely possible that a victory could take place here. And the kind of movement that's emerged at the moment is exactly the kind of movement that will make it likely to be victorious. There is a genuine mass movement. One thing that is missing, which it should be pointed out, I would have loved to have seen in Scotland yesterday a couple of 100,000 trade unionists striking in Scotland against austerity as well. And that's a factor that we need to fight to include in the build-up to the referendum and post-referendum. For us, the independence struggle is a route to more struggle and more resistance. It's not the final destination in itself, it's a stepping stone to wider struggles. And the communist writers, for some people, Brian Souter, the head of Stagecoach, doesn't want independence for the same reasons as we do, does he? He wants it because he thinks it's going to be a low corporation tax economy. It's going to be based on low wages. So we're aware that there will be a struggle post-independence to make sure that it's billionaires like him that pay the price and not ordinary working class people. And there is an argument in Scotland that I never had a chance to address properly in my introduction, but there's one of the campaigns that the slogan is "Britain is for the rich, Scotland can be ours." Now I don't agree with that slogan, because Britain's for a small elite of the rich. There's poor people in England and Wales as much as there is in Scotland and across Glasgow and cities like Edinburgh. Our slogan has to be that we want to squeeze the rich and confront the rich in London, but also the financiers in Edinburgh, the oil barons and the anti-union busters in Aberdeen. In my little pamphlet we have a little rich list of the Scots top 100 richest bastards in the country. I'm not going to go through them all, but Jim McCall, 745 million, Makhanya Siphamandla, he's only got 1.6 billion.
What about that Ratcliffe?
Oh, I'm coming to him, mate. I mean, apart from his £100 million yacht, Ratcliffe's got about 600 million. I mean, the list goes on. We're for taxing and redistributing wealth across the whole of society, including Scotland as well. So we want to target for a redistribution policy across the whole of Scotland. And that will mean confronting Salmon's links with people like Murdoch. You know, we think Murdoch should pay his bloody taxes. You know, Salmon doesn't. So we've got a conflict there. So we're not shying away from a political fight post-independence with Salmon and the SNP. But at this stage of the game we have to say to people, this is not a vote for Alex Salmon or a vote for the SNP. It's a vote against British nationalism, it's a vote against the Tories, it's a vote against neoliberalism. And on the day after it, I'll tell you one thing, you've got to be pretty bloody miserable if we lose it. Well, we won't, because we understand it. But nevertheless, a victory will make it much easier to conduct the kind of struggles that we need to after it. And I think people are right to say, Salmon, I suspect, will try and cut a deal on the question of the currency. And Trident, they're already talking about it in the papers the other day. A deal, the Economist suggests a 99-year deal on the issue of Trident and the currency. So there will be attempts at trade-offs that we'll have to fight against. We know that Salmon is saying you can get rid of Trident, but you can stay in NATO. I mean, it's going to be very difficult to do that. So people are right to say that we need to get on the streets and we need to continue to fight for real struggle from below. The bedroom tax stuff's dead important, by the way, because the thing that people haven't announced today, which happened yesterday in Glasgow, was that Glasgow Labour Council announced that nobody will be pursued for the bedroom tax. You don't have to sign a forum, you don't have to go and meet them, you don't have to speak to them. We've done that. We achieved that victory because we didn't buy into the argument that independence is a substitute for struggle or an alternative to struggle, or that we should wait till after we've achieved it. That's not the business that we're in. We want to use independence to build and strengthen the workers' movement. My final comment is about left unity. You know, I think there is a genuine desire across the Scottish left and the working class for the left to unite. And actually I talk to my kids, I talk to young people that go, who is this Colin Fox guy? What was all that split about 12, 13 years ago? And people are right to say that we need to fight for a united left that offers the working class leadership in Scotland in 2015 and 2016. That's why the Socialist Workers Party, we will launch a left unity statement arguing for all the parties to get together and come in the same room so that we can offer a proper united left challenge that isn't based on the splits of the past. Somebody summed it up by saying, Tommy and Colin should leave their AK-47s outside the room. We should get everybody in the same room and start with the needs of the working class for unity against austerity. If we do that, the prospects for the left in Scotland are very good, and I would argue that that will be a major fill-up and boost. If we can beat the Tories in Scotland, I predict that government won't last until the general election in 2015, because the humiliation will be so extreme that the chances are that government should collapse. So we've got everything to fight for. Again, I would advise people, that's a copy, a little glossy pamphlet that we're distributing around the doors, but please come up. It would be great for us to have coachloads of English and Welsh socialists in every city and town saying, we want you to vote yes and break up the British state. So come and see us at the end if you want to come. Give us your names, your addresses, your emails, and thanks very much.